This was back in 1991. I had my first teaching job at Cortland State, upstate New York. And I was driving up the road one day, and it was snowing. It was like, you know, terrible weather up there, snow belt. And I was driving up through there, and it was the first day of buck season. And it came on a radio report. It said a father and a son had gone, you know, buck hunting first day, and the father had accidentally shot the son, killed him. And when he saw what he'd done, he turned the gun back on himself. And you know, it's one of those kind. You know how you hear a story sometimes, and you don't know why it affects you so badly, but it does. And I remember driving up all the way, and I remember parking my truck and getting out of the car and getting out of the truck and going into my office and sitting down and just thinking about my God, you know, my God, right? And then I don't know how long I sat there before, like a phone rang or somebody showed up, a student. Yeah. Well, actually wanted to talk about school, and I was like, you know, and I've been asked on several times, like, well, did you get in touch with the family? Did you talk to them? And as a fiction writer, that's not really what I do. I'm more concerned with the heartfelt issue. It goes to the heart. Like, I was very interested in why it affected me emotionally so powerfully, and it probably has something to do with my dad was a Marine Corps fighter pilot, and he was a little bit like Gary Hazen. Although I didn't grow up in the Adirondacks, I'm from the South, you know, I didn't grow up like that at all. But I'd spent 7 years up in upstate New York canoeing and camping. So I knew that world, getting in wood, doing all this kind of thing. So I knew that world. When I wrote the book, I wrote it first as a short story. And so I had what looked like the essential pieces for the short story, which was the father and the son. And as I was telling the story, though, I could get to the moment where, I hate to ruin it for you, well, you're nearly to the end, you know. So, and I already told it to you. You already know. No, you don't know the end. It's a big surprise.
I have till 260. I have 261.
Oh, you're right there. So, you know, I could get to the point where, you know, Gary pulled the trigger, and I could get to the point where the father looks in the buck-colored brush, and he looks in, and then he sees his son. And I could get to that moment. But what I found was that in telling a story like that, I can feel the sadness that somebody would turn a gun on themselves. But the trouble with that for me was that even though I feel like, oh, damn, I feel sad, I don't feel the meaning of it. You know what I mean? It's just a newspaper story or a radio report. And so at the time, I was running summer camps in upstate New York while I was going to school. And there was a guy working for me. I bet you can't guess what his name was. He was a carpenter. Gary Hazen. Yeah, I stole his name. That's why I figured they were coming for me. Yeah. So I stole his name. Well, guess what? He had two sons. One of them was named Gary David. I'll bet you can't guess what the other one's name was. Devin, yeah.
Are you for real?
I'm for real. I'm not making that shit up. No, this is a true story. That's what we say in the South. True story. Swear to God. Swear to God. But what happened was, what got my attention about those guys was that Gary Hazen looked a little bit like my dad. He was blonde. He had glasses, and he had been in the Marine Corps. And his older son, Gary David, had his name, Gary and David. He was the older one. But he had black curly hair. So he didn't look, yeah, I stole that too. So anything you say, can and will. And his other son was blonde, looked just like him, but was little. And so, I suddenly realized that, and I mean it like that too, you know, I realized all of a sudden that even though I could get to the moment of what looks like the dramatic action, that the dramatic action isn't always, it isn't what happens, it's why it happens. And so as soon as I understood that, then I understood something about the younger son, and he was the one that brought meaning to the story. You know, where you're that far, right? So he angels his warmth down over his father. And in the short story, it ends with that line, and he dreamt a snow dream, right? The Snow Dreams was the title of that. He dreamt the Rangers stumbled upon them just before dawn. That was the end of the story. Yeah, see? And I'll bet you in the story they all died. And I told my mom I was writing a novel. I said, yeah, Mom, they all died. My mother's from the Mississippi Delta. So she says my name is Tom. She puts 3 syllables in it. Tom. You know, she says, Tom, you can't do that. You know, and I understood what she meant, you know, meaning that in real life anything can happen. You know, you really could get hit by a bowling ball and die. But in fiction, there's usually a reason for what happens. So Gary Hazen, he makes a mistake. It's an accident, but it's born out of who he is. It's actually born out of his carefulness that he shoots his son, strangely enough. But that's usually the way it happens, isn't it? So nothing in fiction is an accident. Nothing in fiction is an accident. Although you don't want it to be exactly as expected either, right? Because what Flannery O'Connor, a great writer, says is that it has to be, when you write a story, it has to be both in character and beyond character. That's kind of cool, isn't it? Like it has to be in you to do it, but it's got to be beyond you. So it's in the realization of the beyond that Gary Hazen, and Kevin too. Kevin surprises himself, I think. He comes to a different understanding both of his father and his love for his family, his mother, you know, all those kinds of things. Not in the way that he would have liked his life to work out, but in a different kind of way. So anyway, I wrote it as a short story. It did really, really well, and I was so happy. You know, it's about a father and his 2 sons. And I finished that, and it won a lot of awards, and you know, got published in a thing called the Pushcart Prize, which was a big deal. I was feeling very proud of myself, thinking I was very, very smart. And my wife reread the story when it came out in the Pushcart Prize. And I actually wrote about this in the back of here. But then she looked at me and she said, "What about the mother?" Yeah, you know, oh, I was like, oh no, like, you know, yeah, I get it that the father lost his son and that the brother loses his brother, but the mother, what? He loses all of them. She loses her life in so many ways. So strangely enough, because I had finished it, I found myself going, well, I guess I haven't finished it. I guess I've just begun to get to know these people. So then I started in, that was the year that we moved here. And I started working on it. It took me 4 years to finish it. Novel writing takes a long time. It's like, you know, you go into a deep mind and you know, yeah, because what's weird, I'm talking too much. You know, what's weird is like, you think that because you write it, you know what's going to happen. Strangely enough, it's not the case. Like, it'd be like me getting to know you or you getting to know me. Like, I'm one person when I'm sitting up here, but I'm a different person, you know, when I'm with my kids or with, you know, or, you know, we all have different facets of ourselves. And so, again, a flat character is merely a good guy or a bad guy or whatever, but a real character, a real person, if you're going to try to make them real, has to have every facet of a human being, even though it just exists on the flat of the page, and it's got to be round, right? So in a sense, what you have to do is you got to say to yourself, this feels like Ouija boardish and artsy fartsy, and I'm not artsy fartsy, but I try to give myself over to the characters. I try to follow them. There's a writer that I very much admire by the name of Andre Debus, and he says, "Which of us is not a story if you follow us through a day and a night?" Because what happens to you in a day and a night, but it's not just that day and a night, it's what brought you to that day and a night, what makes you, you know, do anything that you do. And so it takes a while to sort of pay attention to the details, and that's what I do. There's another writer by the name of John Updike, and he says details in a story are like the headlights in your car when you're driving at night. They illuminate certain things that you can see very clearly. Now, they don't illuminate your destination. That may be 200 miles away, but it's the details of the trip that lead you to that destination. So I try to pay very close attention to the way that the characters talk, to the things that they do, to what they're wearing, you know, to everything about them tells me something. It tells us a lot about people, doesn't it? If I tell you my mother's from the Mississippi Delta, you know, that's a very particular kind of place. But if you told me you were from Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania, that is a very particular place, or wherever you're from. It means something about you. Were your parents divorced? You know, were they, you know, did you grow up Episcopalian, or did anything about you all is sort of like a, what's that thing called, a Rubik's Cube? And you have to flip it around until all of these things make some sort of sense. Not to every character, but to this character. And I thought one thing about this story that was interesting to me was that as I started to tell it, I realized that it was revolving around the hub of a central event, meaning what happened to Gary David and his dad and Kevin. But like, I remember when I was in high school, like this guy, what was his name? Joe Sherlock, I think. And he died in a car accident, you know, when we were in high school. A lot of people have had this kind of thing happen to them. But, you know, it certainly affected his family and, you know, his girlfriend, all that, a lot more than it affected me. But it affected all of us. You know, in one way or another, it affected all of us. And so, for instance, when Lucy Pfeiffer starts talking, right, you know, she's telling not the story of the Hazens, or even Gary Hazen's story, or Susan Hazen's story. She's telling her story. That's interesting, isn't it? So she thinks she understands. She thinks that, for instance, that Susan Hazen is put upon because Susan Hazen, you know, has that garden, she cooks all their meals, you know, so she feels that, you know, she's living in the cold, so she feels that, you know, she's being taken advantage of, in a sense, by Gary. But that's because Lucy feels taken advantage of, because she doesn't want to live in the North Country, you see? So she's looking through it through the lens of her own experience, not through Susan's. Because if you listen to Susan carefully, she loves the hard work she does. You know, she loves gardening. I mean, you know, she's not saying it's easy, you know,